Barr of Kentucky. Congressman, welcome back to the program. That Respect for Marriage Act has to come back to you all for a vote there in the House. You voted against it the first time. Do you plan on voting for it this time or against it?
I'm going to vote against it, TJ, not because we should express intolerance or not respect all of our fellow citizens, but because this is less about protecting the rights that have already been conferred to same-sex marriage and more about expressing intolerance for our fellow citizens who have a traditional view of marriage. Those rights are already enshrined by the Supreme Court, conferring those rights to same-sex couples. We don't need to be expressing scorn for those citizens who have a traditional view of marriage. And what I'm concerned about is the Senate rejected a simple amendment that would protect the conscience rights of Americans, the religious freedom rights of Americans who have a more traditional view of marriage. And this does nothing to change the legal status that same-sex couples have. So it's really just a gratuitous and politically motivated piece of legislation that's not necessary to protect same-sex couples.
Well, Congressman, the Senate did make some tweaks to the language that was supposed to make religious groups and make sure that the religious freedom was ensured. But even after that, it didn't change enough for you to make you want to vote for it this time around?
No, because there's not sufficient protections. Again, the Supreme Court has settled this issue, and so this is more of a politically, in my view, just a more politically motivated effort to express towards Americans who have a more traditional view of marriage. I think we should be a tolerant nation all the way around, and one of the most important principles in our First Amendment is the right to freely exercise one's religion. We need to protect the First Amendment. We need to protect Americans from overzealous interventions into people's religious freedom.
Congressman, you said this is unnecessary because the Supreme Court settled marriage equality. They also settled Roe v. Wade, and I think this is why so many people now think this is necessary, because they wonder what this court is going to do. You've given your reasons here for not supporting it, but do you support same-sex marriage?
I think it's a settled question, and the Supreme Court has resolved that issue. And with respect to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs, it's important to recognize, and the reason why I think this bill is gratuitous and not necessary and politically motivated, is the Supreme Court was very clear in Dobbs in distinguishing its decision to overturn Roe versus Wade and Dobbs not impacting the Obergefell decision that legalized same-sex marriage. They specifically said that the Dobbs decision will not disrupt the Supreme Court's precedent legalizing same-sex marriage. So again, this bill is not necessary to protect same-sex marriage and same-sex couples, but what it would do is it would encroach upon the conscience rights of millions of Americans who simply want to practice their faith, and we shouldn't be forcing people to violate the basic tenets of their beliefs, the basic tenets of their faith. Same-sex couples have the right to marry under Supreme Court precedent. There's no need to have the government interfere with religious institutions or religious beliefs.
And I want to, because it's such an important question, Congressman, there, and you talked about tolerance. And again, I asked you a direct question about same-sex marriage, and it's 2022, and a lot of people are watching on that question. And if you're against same-sex marriage and you have your reasons for it, a lot of people have religious reasons for that. But in this setting, and you're there and talking about reasons for not voting for this particular piece of legislation, because of tolerance, but are you not supportive of, on the record here, are you against same-sex marriage?
No, look, I believe my religious beliefs are one thing, and that's one thing, but in the civil space, in the legal space, as a matter of federal law by the Supreme Court, this issue has been settled, and the Supreme Court reiterated that the issue is settled in the Dobbs decision when they overturned Roe versus Wade, distinguishing their overturning Roe versus Wade from the Obergefell decision, which was the Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage. So we don't need to codify it in a way that would violate the basic fundamental religious beliefs of Americans who believe in traditional marriage. Tolerance should go in all directions, TJ. We should be tolerant of people who want same-sex marriage. We should also be tolerant of those people of faith who believe in the religious institution of marriage being between one man and one woman. And I think this country is a tolerant country, but tolerance goes in all directions, and we shouldn't have double standards.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave that topic at least there. But of course, as you know, after some comments by Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas, a lot of people were nervous that this court could now take up other, like you said, precedents that have been set, just like Roe v. Wade. And we see what happened there. I do want to ask you about Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. I think you support him for Speaker, but it looks like he might not have maybe the votes and the support, because a few Republicans have come out and said they would not support him as Speaker. So he might not have a majority. What do you think is going to happen here? Are we going to have a Speaker McCarthy?
We are going to have a Speaker McCarthy, and there is no member of the House Republican Conference who has done more to secure this majority, as thin as it is, as you pointed out in the top of the show. It's nevertheless the majority, and that will enable us to put the brakes on this overspending, higher taxes, big government agenda from the Biden administration that has created this inflation crisis, that has produced a crisis at the southern border because of refusal to secure the southern border, the crime crisis, the fact that we have a weak foreign policy that has invited aggression from China, from Putin, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. We will have the gavels, and just because it's a small majority doesn't mean that we won't have oversight. They don't give out small, medium, or large-sized gavels. They only give out gavels, and that means we're going to have the oversight that the American people voted for, the check and balance that the American people voted for. We're going to be laser focused on our Commitment to America agenda, which is going to tackle this inflation crisis that's been created by one-party rule in Washington. We need to stop the overspending, which has created excess demand. And we need to fix the supply side, which the Democrat majority in Congress and President Biden have created, have exacerbated from the pandemic. With higher taxes that has prevented the business investment that is needed to repair the supply chains, and the war on domestic energy. We're going to have a 10-year high cost in energy prices this winter, TJ. Americans are going to suffer because of high prices, high energy prices. And the Republican Commitment to America agenda is at the centerpiece of fixing the inflation crisis and high energy prices is to produce American energy again and stop President Biden's war on domestic energy. We need more, not less, investment in American energy. We need to stop the weaponization of financial regulation that is depriving sources of financing and capital to American energy. We need to restart infrastructure projects in this country that will deliver energy. We need to produce more domestic energy to lower the price of the pump, to lower electricity costs, and to generally alleviate inflation. That's the Republican agenda. Kevin McCarthy is the architect of this agenda, and that's why he's going to ultimately secure the votes. And what I would say to my Republican colleagues who want to make the perfect the enemy of the good is that if we don't have unity, if Republicans don't unite behind leadership and behind a singular purpose agenda like the Commitment to America, all you're doing and all we're doing is empowering the same failed policies of the last 2 years. So I think unity in the Republican conference is the key to solving these problems for the American people.
Congressman, I started the segment. I hope you don't mind me asking here finally. I welcomed you back to the program because the last time we had you on, you were here talking about the Carol Act that you did sponsor in honor of your late wife who died of a sudden cardiac death from a common condition that kills very few. And I only want to ask, just you have 2 young girls. Just want to ask you how you're doing, how your girls are doing, how the family's holding up.
TJ, thanks a lot for asking. We miss Carol very much every day, and her life was cut far too short. She was only 39 years old when she suffered an unexpected cardiac event that took her life. She left behind 2 beautiful daughters who are her ultimate legacy. But we've introduced this bill in her name, the Carol Act, the Cardiovascular Advances in Research and Opportunities Legacy Act. It passed the House unanimously. I'm told it's going to pass the Senate today and head to the president's desk probably next week with some technical changes. But here's the bottom line, is this bill is going to save lives. There are 25,000 Americans who suffer a sudden cardiac death every year from mitral valve prolapse, which is what my wife suffered from. The vast majority of Americans who have MVP, it's a benign condition and they live just fine with it. But the problem is we don't know who has a life-threatening condition, and the vast majority of people who have this condition who live long and healthy lives. So we need more research to investigate this and to identify those people like my wife who are in a life-threatening situation so that we can have life-saving interventions. And I am hopeful that the CAROL Act, when signed into law, will deliver on those promises and help save lives. And it's a great legacy for my wife. We never get her back, and those 25,000 other families, they never get their loved ones back. But her life, it continues to have meaning and purpose beyond her years, and we are so optimistic that this is going to save lives.
All right, well, Congressman, we appreciate you and that answer and answering all of our questions here and being on the program again. I know we're going to see you down the road. Thanks so much, all right?